Hello and welcome to another episode of the Daily Remedy Podcast. Today we're here with Mrs. Robyn Woidtke, Editor-in-Chief of Sleepworld magazine. Robyn's career has spanned the medical device industry and includes the direction of clinical research administration, regulatory, and clinical quality roles. She has also participated in the development of marketing, educational, and patient-centered programs, primarily in the sleep industry. Her focus is on the patient's therapeutic journey and reducing burdens of care through support, education, health literacy, and the impact of social determinants of health. And with that, I'd like to welcome Ms. Woidtke. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Why don't you start by telling us what a typical day is like for you?
Well, I work from home, uh, and my role is I'm the editor for Sleep World magazine, and what that entails is getting authors, which I'm always open to having new authors. So if people are willing to send me something, I'd love to read and help the process along. And so, in addition to my editing work, I'm also a consultant working for mostly startup medical companies, medical device companies in the sleep apnea space, sleep, treatment space, sometimes the sleep diagnostic space. So it really depends. But and my role within those companies, because I like to work for smaller startup companies, is like I get to wear many different hats. So I do put on my clinical hat, so I can do clinical research administration. I do, preparation for FDA submissions, help people in the quality system, making sure that, all the ducks are in a row. Working also, one of my passions is making sure that patients understand the information and the instructions for use are written in such a way that it's easy for them to follow, and there's no room for error or minimal room for error on the part of the patient. Sometimes that requires doing, some human factors type research, reading and interpreting what was written. So that's the fun part of what I really, really enjoy doing, is making sure that the patients have actionable and information, educational information that they can use in their day-to-day living.
What do most people, and indeed most entrepreneurs in the sleep health space, not understand about the quality management system and the regulatory world around sleep medical devices?
Well, in fact, I just read an article, do physicians understand the regulatory process? And a lot of the answer is no. I think there's some misunderstanding on like, for the majority of class 2 products, which a majority of sleep products fall into a class 2 unless they're an implantable, are cleared to market through the 510K or the pre-market notification process versus a pre-market approval, which are more things like life-sustaining implantable devices. So again, the majority of our devices are cleared to market through the 510K or the pre-market notification process. We don't often, only about 10% of medical devices in the class 2 for the pre-market notification have to have clinical trial data. Usually it's in the form of substantial equivalence to a product that's already on the market. And that's how FDA determines the safety and effectiveness and looks at the risk versus benefit ratios and things like that, as well as maintaining one of the requirements is having a quality management system under 21 CFR Part 820 for FDA, or the ISO 13455 in the medical device, or the ISO world, specifically for medical devices. It's ISO 13. Yeah.
There's a lot of technical jargon,
there's a lot of numbers, things to remember, but it's fun. I enjoy what I do.
What piques your interest about sleep? Why did you decide to focus on that condition in your career?
A good question. I don't think anybody chooses to go into sleep when you start your career. I am a registered nurse by background, and I entered the field of sleep medicine in 1985. kind of through a happenstance of things that was like this was meant for me to be in this field. I left hospital nursing and was working for a small company doing home apnea monitoring for high risk babies. And the neonatologists we worked with were interested in learning more and doing full, complete sleep studies versus just looking at respiratory and heart rate on a home pneumogram or in a hospital pneumogram, the 2-channel pneumogram. So I started my career in sleep doing sleep studies on high risk babies, 4 and 5 pounders, all hooking them all up to electrodes and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I worked in adult sleep, running a sleep clinic at UC Irvine in their medical center there. And then moved to Stanford and was doing SIDS research, where we were looking at things like circadian rhythm development in the NICU, as well as we're looking to see if babies don't thermoregulate, and so some of them, when they're found, are found to have a higher core body temperature, and so we were kind of looking at those data as well. And then I moved into the medical device industry after that. So it's been a while.
Nice. So you mentioned a couple of conditions, so sudden infant distress syndrome, other medical conditions that you focused on. What distinguishes sleep help as a science compared to a lot of perhaps subclinical complaints or conditions that patients may have?
Well, I think everybody sleeps. At least you
Yeah.
hope everybody sleeps. So it's like, I kind of look at it as it's the umbrella that everybody has to be under. And without good sleep, I think people don't realize, a lot of people don't even realize when they're tired or sleepy. And it's not until maybe they're driving or doing something repetitive or sitting in front of a lecture, especially at home on a
Yeah.
webcast, they start to get a little drowsy and they're sleepy. I think one of the biggest misconceptions, oh, I sleep great the minute my head hits the pillow, I fall asleep. Well, that's not really a good thing. Um, there's a normal sleep latency. 10 minutes should take us to fall asleep, really, when we're ready to go to sleep. So if you're falling asleep the minute your head hits the pillow, that means you're essentially too sleepy.
Hmm.
You have you're showing signs of sleep deprivation. So sleep deprivation can come from many different things. Can come from conditions such as obstructive sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, certainly narcolepsy, other conditions that may contribute to sleep deprivation, comorbidities, cardiac issues, any respiratory issues. So all of those, there's this bidirectionality between other chronic conditions and the impact that they have on sleep. Even dermatological conditions that might cause itchiness during the night, or sleep deprivation can contribute to the release of stress hormones and things, which can exacerbate some of these uh, dermatologic conditions. So it's just fascinating to me how much sleep, and or the good sleep or the lack of good sleep or good quality and quantity of sleep can impact pretty much everything within our life. And that's what's
Yeah.
exciting, because and new things are coming up all the time. Recently, within the last 20 or so years, scientists discovered the glymphatic system, which is a system that cleans the brain out of the waste, the waste products in the brain, similar to the lymphatic system, but it's also only works during slow waves, mostly works during slow wave sleep, when we have big waveforms to push these waste products out and get good products in, basically. So it's very complicated. But it was very exciting because one of the waste products is amyloid betas, which can, as you know, contribute to Alzheimer's. So it's exciting, where you think about sleep as a therapeutic target
Yeah.
for other conditions. So it's fun stuff.
No, it's very interesting. It's such a big part of our lives. At times a symptom, at times a disease, and now a potential form of therapeutic. I think with the push towards longevity, we're starting to look at sleep in new vein. Can you talk a little bit about how the longevity trend is redefining our perspectives on sleep and sleep hygiene?
Well, I think that, there's always this misconception about, you know, we need less sleep as we get older and things like that. But we probably all still need that good 7 to 8 hours of sleep, which is recommended by most, I'll call it professional sleep organizations, the National Sleep Foundation, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. But I think what we do see is changes in how sleep is expressed in terms of brainwave activity. Again, older people might take a nap during the day, which lessens their drive to sleep at night. They might go to sleep earlier, let's say at 8 o'clock, and then they wake up at 3 a.m. and they say, I can't sleep, I have insomnia, but in reality, they've just shifted. And so working with them to understand, again, getting light in the morning, doing exercise, limiting light at night, limiting, alcohol in the evening as much as you can, you know, decreasing your caffeine intake, but all of those go into the sleep hygiene. And also, people can call it sleep hygiene or good sleep practices, however you want to phrase it. But also, bedrooms should be cool and dark, and you really shouldn't be, when your iPad here or your phone or the TV or the things that distract us from actually enjoying that feeling of falling asleep. It's like, you know,
Yeah. You mentioned various sleep organizations and this trend now towards protocols and really distinguishing sleep as a science from the pseudoscience, which, to be quite frank, has been lagging in the overall healthcare community. Can you talk about the recent developments in codifying sleep as a medical society and
oh,
establishing proper scientific protocols?
so I think it was way back I think in 1979 was actually the first professional sleep society meeting, hosted by Dr. Bill Dement, uh, and kind of the father of sleep medicine, if you would. And it was here actually in Palo Alto, California, near Stanford. And and so that was kind of the first thing that we need to come together before it was before my time. And so coming together as a profession. And from that, then there was also what was called the APT then, which was the Association of Polysomnographic Technologists. So it was kind of the technologist side, and then we had the professional MD, PhD side of things. But um, the sleep technology group now changed to the American Association of Sleep Technologists, which kind of helped them. We have guidelines, policies, and things like that, such as the AASM. And then in the dental world, you have the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine, AADSM. And so, working together, it's a science. I mean, we have tons of data to support all of these different brain changes and brain things that happen when we sleep. It's not it's a profession. It's accepted as a profession, a scientific. We have the Sleep Research Society, so it's it's a profession that should be accepted and understood by all the other medical specialties out there. The problem is what we're seeing too, I think, is that, like I said, I didn't ever think to go into sleep. How would I know there was a profession out there? I just happened to fall into it, lucky me. And but a lot of people aren't going into the field of sleep medicine, and we're seeing, we had an increase in sleep technologists. A lot of people are retiring or, you know, changing the profession, but we don't have enough sleep technologists to do the work anymore. And I think there's a significant decrease in sleep physicians as well to accommodate the need for the millions and millions of people who have a sleep disorder, who are undiagnosed with sleep apnea, who continue to be out there working and driving buses and trucks and flying
Yeah,
airplanes and things like that. But I think the important thing is, and as I said, I'm a nurse by background, and we aren't taught really much about sleep or sleep
yeah,
medicine in nursing practice. And so Even still, recently there's been a push to increase the sleep education within nursing curricula. So we, I think that's one of the things that I've been trying to do is get articles written. I have actually an article coming up in the American Journal of Nursing in March. So I look forward to continue to spread the word about sleep and the importance of what I say, make sleep inquiry an always event, meaning that at every patient encounter, some people should mention, how are you sleeping? Do you feel like you get enough sleep? Are you rested when you get up? How quick does it, how fast do you fall asleep? But people use other words too, oh, I'm so fatigued all the time, or I just feel drowsy, or I have this general malaise, whatever it might be. Sometimes they use that to describe because they're not sure that they're sleep deprived, but it manifests or in their brain different ways to actually describe what they're feeling.
I'm really glad you mentioned that because we talked about in earlier conversations between you and me about sleep advocates and having sleep advocates educate physicians, nurses, and the general patient population. Where do you see the role of a sleep advocate in one, raising awareness, and two, helping to indoctrinate it into the traditional clinical encounter?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a credential through the Board of Registered Polysomnographic Technologists called it's a CCSH, or it's a Credential in Clinical Sleep Health, that nurses can actually take the exam. It's a very rigorous exam and psychometrically developed. Um, Also, dental hygienists can take this exam. A really almost anyone can take this exam given if they meet the criteria. So I think that's in a way the first step to disseminate that there is a credential out there that can be used within a practice of in a wide variety of roles. More recently, there has been I'm going to say a drive, but a movement, if you would, for acute care facilities to hire or engage with sleep navigators within an inpatient environment. So that if somebody flags that they think a patient might have an issue or whatever, the navigator can go and meet with this patient, ask the correct questions, and try to funnel them back into being to a sleep physician or a sleep clinic to get diagnosed or to see if there's any other issues that need to be addressed from a sleep perspective. So, and there are certainly data now, I think, starting to come out that support the role of the sleep navigators reducing actually poor outcomes in this population. So, and the one thing we actually have an article on sleep navigators coming out in the Sleep World magazine on how the navigators work in this environment. But one of the things I think that stuck out to me is now they're not in a silo. They're not in a sleep silo. They're branching out and they're working with OT, PT, nurses, pharmacists. I mean, a wide range of clinical professions that they were basically previously exposed to, or those professions weren't really exposed to what happens in a sleep clinic type environment. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think having that wide approach helps healthcare professionals up and down the patient journey really understand the importance of integrating sleep into the care. I want to perhaps transition to the other side, that of the patient, and focus on health literacy. As we mentioned earlier in the conversation, sleep is something everybody does. So I'm sure everybody has their own opinion, some scientific, some not. How do you navigate health literacy through the lens of science in a world of misinformation and an overabundance of maybe perhaps quote unquote frivolous information?
No, it's very difficult. Even interest, there are some data to support the fact that even materials that are coming out from a sleep perspective and I'm sure across many different avenues, that the materials that are given to patients are not actually at a readability level that they need to have. I will often just pick up things, I'll see something online, I'll copy it and put it on and to see what kind of readability is, because I'm thinking, oh, these big long words, people aren't going to read, begin to understand it. So I think there's using plain language is one area that I think we can focus on that resonates with most people. Writing, making sure that if we are writing patient-facing materials, that they are at a language and that they have like bullets and bold and box and things like that point out really important things. You can read blah, 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 but what's really important to you as the patient? What do you need? What do you really need to retain and know? What's actionable for you? Again, putting things into bite-sized pieces, using, I'll kind of go back to some of like motivational interviewing kinds of things. It's like, well, what happens if you don't do this, right? How do we, how get people to start to think a little bit different? So if they're not sleeping well, or if they think that they might have a problem, how can we get them to action that? It's funny. I just saw something recently. It's like we have all of these, we've got all these gadgets and things and sleep, right? We got Ring, we got beds, we got, home sleep tests, we've got things to pick up the sound, we got apps for snoring, we got that. It reminded me of the Little Mermaid song, I got gadgets and gizmos aplenty, but I want more. But it's and every day I find that there seems to be more gadgets. The good thing is it has increased awareness on what they want to record the sleep, but I don't think we know quite yet what to do with all of these new consumer sleep technology, right? Nearables, wearables, things like that. So I think from that perspective, people are trying to better understand their sleep, because they're starting to realize that it is an important component of health, actually one of the foundations of health. I think one of the things I think about like a three-legged stool, right? You've got, exercise, you've got nutrition, and the third leg of the stool could be sleep. And so any one of those legs get longer or shorter. You eat too much, you don't eat enough. You exercise too much, you don't exercise enough. You sleep too much, you don't sleep enough. And all of those things make the stool wobbly. So that's kind of how I kind of like to look at it. And people go in their mind, they go, oh, I get that. I get that if you don't have enough sleep, my stool is wobbly. If I have too much sleep, I'm also wobbly. And, I don't know if you're familiar with, it's called the U shape of sleep, right? So in terms of hours of sleep. So if we get too little amount of sleep, there predisposes us to things like, diabetes and cardiovascular issues. On the other side of the spectrum, you get too much sleep, it might be indicative of other things like depression or other, comorbid conditions. So really kind of the sweet spot or the cradle is the U, I call it, that 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But again, just making things simple and getting people to understand how important it is to not just, mentally, but physically, immune system, our heart, our endocrine system. I mean, everything is impacted by sleep deprivation. But I think people don't connect what happens at night impacts what's happening during the day sometimes. I think connecting those dots, I think, is important for people too.
And as you mentioned, connecting the dots requires a certain level of learning. You have access to quite a few resources through your organizations and through Sleep World magazine as well. Can you describe some of the resources that patients can leverage, as well as some of the resources that healthcare providers can leverage?
Sure. Of course, there's the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, which is the medical association regarding sleep. There are a lot of patient resources, like patient education resources. I believe there is I think you can click on a thing where it can help you to find a sleep specialist if you need that. Then again, from the dental side, because there's, a lot of patients for sleep apnea are treated with CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure with the mask that goes on and blows the air and splints the airway open. Some people use an oral appliance that brings the jaw forward and opens. So there's the American Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine. They also have resources on their patient education, but also resources to find qualified dentists. There's the National Sleep Foundation. There's the American Sleep Apnea Association. I mean, that's just to name a few. Also, I'm a big I like to look at government websites, and so there's a fair amount of information on the CDC website and the NIH websites as well. Um, but I think when people can just type in sleep, I like to look at like what I find or what I feel is good information from from like Mayo Clinic, from Cleveland Clinic, from Harvard. They often will have sleep things on there, that you can avail yourself of in terms of getting the information that's needed. But I kind of find those resources, those would be my go-tos
Hmm.
to, other than PubMed,
Right.
to be able to find the information that I'm looking for.
Nice. One of the aspects of sleep that you focus on are the social determinants of health. We often use that phrase, perhaps overused at times. From a scientific standpoint, can you explain what SDOH in the healthcare realm of sleep actually means?
Well, when you think about the social determinants of health, it's a broad spectrum of different things, and not everybody might have economic issues. They might have access issues because they live in a health, you know, HIPSA kind of an area, health shortage professional area, but they may be economically okay. So there are different ways, I think, to look at the social determinants of health. Again, not everybody has all of the different factors, and I'm not a social determinants of health expert, but from a sleep perspective, when I think about the social determinants of health, the impact of sleep is that we forget to say, well, how are you sleeping? Where are you sleeping? People say, well, I live in a neighborhood where there's high crime. So although I have a bed to sleep in, I'm on edge all the time. Therefore, I don't get good sleep. It's maybe a lower socioeconomic area. They're also finding areas that don't have green space, adequate lighting, things like that, that can also impact someone's ability to sleep. Um, and the fact too, I think that people don't recognize that they actually have a sleep disorder because they're not exposed to the right, maybe again, people aren't asking about sleep. So
Yeah.
even if they do see a physician or nurse practitioner, um, they're not being asked to, do you have a sleep problem? Also, I think when I think about so sleeping, we I'm sure you hear the term food desert, right? So, but I like to think of these as sleep deserts
Yeah.
that people that they don't have a place to sleep. That it's not necessarily that they might be you know unhoused, but even still they might have some place to go, but not have a good place to sleep in a where in the environment in which we should be sleeping in. Maybe they're hungry. They don't have enough food to eat. So it all kind of, I think, to me at least, it all sort of kind of goes together. That you can't ignore sleep within the context of the social determinants of health.
Well said. I want to conclude with perhaps a bit of a controversial question, but I think it's important for the listening audience. Philips made news lately, particularly for a very wide recall. And there's different angles to the story, different perspectives. Can you explain to us what's going on and what we can expect, particularly for those patients who are using Philips sleep devices?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Hmm.
Well, we, I think we in the sleep world have been paying a lot of attention to this issue. I mean, my husband's a CPAP user. I have lots of friends who are CPAP users. So um, we, I think we've just sort of gone, okay, this is a big issue. We need to address it. I know FDA just put out I think it's a class 1 recall notice, a safety notice regarding this issue. I think people should be contacting, if they still have some of these machines, contacting their durable medical equipment company. I think that, you know, I think that Philips has information on their website to help patients through this issue. Um, Unfortunately, I think sometimes people don't know what to do, and from what I was hearing, the durable medical equipment companies didn't really know what to do, and nobody wanted to be without therapy, but people were scared. So I
Yeah.
mean, I can't really, I don't know enough about the the inside scoop, so to speak. I do know that there's some inquiry from the government accounting office actually recently, and was asked to look at the FDA response to the Philips recall. I just actually read about that yesterday or today.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an ongoing issue, but I think people need just to be aware, and there are other options for them. Obviously, there are other manufacturers of CPAP devices that they can access. Certainly, oral appliance therapy. Um, there's, and I'm sure everybody has seen, all of the hypoglossal nerve stimulation therapy. So I think that the point here is that there are other options for patients, but they just need to, and it's hard to find time to do these things, but to kind of find the right path for them. Again, it's hard for me to comment just because I don't know all of the ins and
Yeah.
outs, but that would be if I were advising a patient, I would basically say, let's look and see what you have. Let's see if we can contact, the company. Let's contact the durable medical equipment company. Let's see what other options we can find for you, at least until this issue is cleared up. That's
No,
how I
well
would
said.
that's how I would respond.
Yeah, it's tough for everybody all around. Um, with the remaining time that we have, Ms. Woidtke, can you let the listening audience know, should they be interested in contributing to Sleep World magazine, how they can get a hold of you, and what type of articles you're looking for?
Oh, we look for any articles related to sleep.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because, um, I said I just get I really enjoy the variety that we have coming in. We have an article coming from you,
Mhm.
so we'll look forward to that. And really, or we like articles that are kind of written in a very conversational tone, yet are actionable. Our main readers are sleep technologists. We have doctors, we have dentists. I hope more and more nurses will start to be reading it. And we have a wide range of topics from um, oral appliances to heart conditions and sleep problems and dermatological problems in sleep. So, really, anything that people think would be interesting from a professional standpoint that other people would like to know that could help them in their practice are kinds of articles that I like to have. Oftentimes, we don't have time to read all of the scientific literature. There's a lot of statistics and people kind of glaze over. So, so the articles that I like to promote within Sleep World magazine are, again, those that ring a bell with people. That's, oh, I know I should be asking that, or, oh, that's great, I'm going to implement that in my clinic, or in talking to my patients. So that's the kind of thing that I like. So to get a hold of me, I mean, they can just actually go to Sleep World magazine. There's a link there that says for authors, and it has our contact information, and they can reach me via that way, or it's just Robyn at Sleep Lab Magazine. We just changed the name, .com, so they can reach me there.
Awesome. And Ms. Woidtke, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Mm.
Thanks for the opportunity.